If alcohol were invented in a lab tomorrow, no government on Earth would let it leave the building. It's a known carcinogen. It's linked to roughly 200 different diseases. The World Health Organization estimates it kills around 3 million people every year. You can buy it at a gas station. So why isn't alcohol banned? The honest answer involves your DNA, a Soviet sugar shortage, and a scientist who got fired for telling the truth. Most mammals can't actually process alcohol. Give a dog a beer, and its liver essentially gives up halfway through. But around 10 million years ago, a single mutation in a single liver enzyme, called ADH4, made our great ape ancestors roughly 40 times better at metabolizing ethanol than the average primate. Biologists have a name for what happened next: the drunken monkey hypothesis. When fruit falls and ferments, the alcohol gives off a stronger scent than fresh fruit. It travels further on the wind. For our ancestors, that smell wasn't recreation. It was a homing signal, the strongest food source in the forest, broadcasting its location. The apes who chased it ate the most calories. The apes who could digest it lived the longest. Their genes ended up in you. And every time you take a sip today, your brain releases dopamine through the exact same reward circuit that pulled our ancestors down from the trees, which is exactly what the United States tried to override in 1920. You know the cultural story. Speakeasies, Al Capone. Prohibition was a disaster. Except medically, it wasn't. Alcohol consumption fell by as much as 70%. Cirrhosis deaths collapsed. Public drunkenness arrests cratered. By every health measure, Prohibition was one of the most successful public health campaigns of the 20th century. So if it worked, why did they end it? 1933, the Great Depression. Federal tax revenue had collapsed. And before Prohibition, alcohol taxes had funded between 30 and 40% of the entire federal budget. Prohibition didn't end because of crime. It ended because the government was broke. Half a century later, a country with no profit motive tried again. 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev launched an anti-alcohol campaign across the Soviet Union. Vodka factories shut, vineyards bulldozed, public drinking criminalized, and then sugar disappeared. The reason was that millions of Soviet citizens were now distilling moonshine in their kitchens. Sugar was the raw material. Demand had quietly become infinite. Life expectancy did briefly climb, but the Soviet treasury lost an estimated 100 billion rubles in alcohol revenue, at the exact moment the economy could least afford it. Some historians argue the campaign accelerated the collapse of the USSR by years. Both experiments revealed the same hidden mechanic. Economists call it the Iron Law of Prohibition. The principle is simple. The harder you ban a drug, the stronger that drug becomes. Imagine you're a smuggler. You have one truck and one chance before you get caught. Are you filling that truck with beer or with grain alcohol that's 10 times more concentrated and 50 times more profitable per liter? Within 2 years of Prohibition starting, America had switched almost overnight from beer to hard liquor. The economics did it for them. And there's a darker side. Underground distilling is genuinely difficult. Get it wrong and you produce methanol, wood alcohol, instead of ethanol. Methanol blinds you. Then it kills you. Which brings us to the second mechanic, the one no government likes to talk about. In the UK, alcohol duty raises over £12 billion a year. In the US, federal and state alcohol taxes bring in over $30 billion annually. Every government on Earth is using alcohol tax money to fund the hospitals treating people for drinking too much. A few countries have decided to test the Iron Law anyway. Iran has, by some estimates, over 1 million people in treatment for alcohol use disorder, in a country where possession can be punished with lashings. The Indian state of Bihar has the population of Germany. It banned alcohol completely in 2016. Within 5 years, the state's prison population had nearly doubled. In a single week of December 2022, bootleg liquor poisoning killed over 200 people. The ban is, technically, still in place. So why is alcohol not banned? Because biology built us to chase it. Because the two superpowers that properly tried lost a treasury and a country in the attempt. Because the ban creates worse drugs than the drug. And because every government on Earth now needs the very thing destroying its citizens. There's a US state where you can buy beer in a supermarket, but not wine. There's a Norwegian town where the entire annual alcohol supply arrives on one ferry in October. There's a country where you can drink in public, but only sitting down. Tell me the strangest alcohol law where you live. I read every comment. One last thing. In 2010, a study in the Lancet ranked alcohol as more harmful overall than heroin. The lead author was a psychiatrist named David Nutt, who, a year earlier, had been the UK government's chief drug advisor. They fired him for it. Nutt didn't quit. He spent the next 15 years in a lab in London building a replacement. It's called Alcarel, a synthetic compound that targets the same GABA receptors in your brain that alcohol does, giving you the relaxation, the social warmth, the mild buzz, without the toxicity, without the hangover, without the addiction. He's currently pursuing regulatory approval in the US, with the EU and Asia Pacific to follow. The man they fired for saying alcohol was too dangerous is about to put the safer version on a shelf next to it.